Right now, in the stillness between your thoughts, a question is forming. Not loud, not urgent, but soft as the space between heartbeats. It arrives not with fanfare, but with the quiet persistence of dew gathering on a spider's web at dawn. What if taxes don't really exist? Not in the way we've been taught to see them, not as lines on a form, not as deductions blinking red on a screen, not as something taken from you like a toll at a gate you never asked to pass through. What if instead they are something far older, something woven into the very act of being human? Think of the last time you walked down a street lit by lamps you didn't pay for individually, or drank water that arrived clean and cold without you ever digging a well, or felt safe enough to sleep with the windows open, trusting that someone, somewhere, keeps watch, not because they know you, but because they belong to the same fragile web of care. That web has a name we've grown suspicious of. We call it taxes. But maybe the word has outlived its truth. Maybe it's become a mask over something more tender, the quiet agreement that we are not alone. You've felt this before, haven't you? That flicker of warmth when a public park welcomes you on a tired afternoon. That unspoken relief when a fire truck races past, not toward your house, but someone else's, and you know help is coming. These are not accidents. They are echoes of a choice made long ago, repeated daily, often without fanfare, to pool a little of what we have so that all of us might have enough. And yet, we speak of taxes like loss, like theft, like a weight. But what if that's only because we've forgotten the hands that built the bridges we cross without looking down? Close your eyes for a moment, not to escape, but to remember. Before money, before nations, before written laws, humans gathered around fires and shared what they had. Not because they were forced to, but because survival whispered the same truth to every generation. You cannot thrive in isolation. The mammoth was too large for one, the storm too fierce for one shelter, the child's cry too urgent for one pair of arms, so they gave. Not from surplus, but from necessity, not as charity, but as kinship. That impulse never left us. It only changed shape. It became grain stored in temple granaries. It became labor on Roman roads. It became silver coins stamped with a king's face. And now it becomes numbers moving through invisible wires while you sleep. But the essence remains. Taxes, at their core, might not be a system of extraction at all. They might be the modern echo of an ancient ritual, the daily reaffirmation that we are part of something larger than ourselves, that your well-being is tied to mine, that when one stumbles, the whole circle leans in. And if that's true, if taxes are not a bill but a bond, then what we call paying might actually be participating, not losing, but belonging. The question isn't whether taxes exist in ledgers and laws. Of course they do. But what if their deeper reality, the one that matters most, is not in the taking, but in the giving? Not in the obligation, but in the offering? You don't need to answer now. Just let the question rest in your mind like a stone in a still pond. Watch the ripples move outward, touching everything. History, justice, community, even the quiet dignity of a street sweeper working at sunrise. Because somewhere beneath the noise of politics and paperwork, there's a truth as old as breath. We survive by sharing. And maybe, just maybe, that's all taxes ever were. A whisper from the past saying, we're in this together. And you, listening in the dark, are already part of the answer. Outside your window, the world is softening. Streetlights cast amber halos on rain-slick pavement, their glow diffused by a thin veil of mist that clings to the air like a held breath. A distant car hums past, tires whispering over wet asphalt, just a sigh in the night. Somewhere, a cat leaps from a fence to a roof, silent as a shadow. Inside, the only sound is the quiet tick of a clock you almost never notice, until now. You're here, in this room, in this moment, surrounded by things you didn't build, but that hold you gently all the same. The walls that shelter you, the pipes that carry warm water at your command, the electricity that keeps your phone alive, your fridge humming its low, steady song. None of it asked your name, none of it demanded gratitude, and yet it's all here, reliable, invisible, waiting. Now imagine tracing each thread back to its source. That light above you, it travels through wires strung across poles maintained by crews you've never met, paid by a utility funded in part by public revenue. The road outside, paved with asphalt laid down by workers whose wages came from a municipal budget shaped by, yes, what we call taxes. Even the quiet safety of this hour, the absence of chaos, the knowledge that if something went wrong, help would come. That, too, is stitched into the fabric of collective care. But long before concrete and copper, before cities rose from earth, humans gathered in clearings under open skies and made a different kind of infrastructure. Trust. They shared meat from the hunt, not because a ledger demanded it, but because hunger was a shared condition. They kept watch through the night, not for payment, but because danger didn't discriminate. The earliest tax wasn't written, it was lived. It was the understanding that no one eats alone in a world where storms come for everyone. And still, that rhythm pulses beneath modern life, though we've wrapped it in bureaucracy and balance sheets. When you pay your water bill, you're not just covering your own use, you're helping maintain the reservoirs, the treatment plants, the engineers who ensure that every tap in the city flows clean. When you fund a public school, you're not only educating someone else's child, you're weaving a future where fewer people are lost to ignorance, where more hands are ready to heal, build, imagine. This room you're in, it's held up by invisible hands, not ghosts, just people. Teachers, firefighters, librarians, sanitation workers, nurses, planners, scientists. All of them, in some way, sustained by a system that asks each of us to give a little so that all of us might have a foundation. You might not see them, but you feel their work in the quiet reliability of your world, in the way the bus arrives on time, in the way the library stays open on a rainy Tuesday, in the way emergency alerts flash on your phone when danger nears, warnings sent not for profit, but for protection. The night deepens, the mist thickens, and still the world keeps turning, not by magic but by mutual agreement. A silent pact, renewed every day, often without words. I'll help carry the weight if you will too. You don't have to believe in the system to benefit from it. But perhaps in this hush, you can feel its presence, not as a burden, but as a kind of quiet kinship, like the way trees in a forest share nutrients through hidden fungal threads beneath the soil. No one tree owns the network, but all are nourished by it. And you, here in the soft light of your room, are part of that network too. Maybe you felt it without realizing. This sense of being held, even when you're alone. It's not sentimentality, it's structure. It's design. It's the echo of 1,000 choices to build something that outlasts any one person. So as you listen to the distant hum of the city breathing, ask yourself, what if the thing we call taxes is simply the modern language for an ancient truth? We belong to each other, and everything you see around you, the light, the warmth, the safety, is proof that, however imperfectly, we've never stopped trying to live that truth. When you close your eyes and think of taxes, what appears? For many, it's a sharp image, a stack of forms, a red number on a screen, a feeling of something slipping away. It's subtraction, loss, a quiet resentment that blooms each April, or each payday, or each time you swipe a card and wonder how much of that coffee went not to the barista, but to the unseen machinery behind the counter. But what if that image is only a shadow of the real thing? Imagine instead a river, not a dammed reservoir hoarded behind concrete walls, but a living current winding through valleys, feeding roots, filling ponds, evaporating into clouds that return as rain. You stand on its bank and watch the water move, not gone, just traveling. It doesn't vanish when it leaves your cupped hands. It continues, it nourishes, it returns. Taxes, in their truest form, are less like a toll booth and more like that river. We've been taught to see them as a withdrawal from our wallets, our freedom, our hard-earned effort. But look closer. That withdrawal becomes a deposit elsewhere. The money that leaves your account doesn't disappear into a void. It flows into roads you drive on without thinking, into the hands of the technician who fixes the traffic light that keeps your commute safe, into the classroom where a child learns to read, to question, to dream beyond the limits of their zip code. You don't see the full journey. That's the illusion. You see only the moment of release, the instant your paycheck shrinks, and not the 1,000 places it lands, like seeds carried on the wind. And yet, you benefit from those landings every day. Think of the last time you walked into a public library. No one asked for your ID. No one charged you for the chair you sat in, the book you opened, the Wi-Fi that connected you to the world. That space exists because, long ago, a community decided that knowledge should not be locked behind gates. That quiet room with its shelves and silence. It's funded by the same system you might resent on tax day. But in that moment, surrounded by stories, by possibility, you didn't feel taxed. You felt welcomed. Or consider the ambulance that races through red lights, sirens wailing, not because someone paid extra for speed, but because emergency services are woven into the public fabric. You may never need it, but if you do, it comes without a price tag at the door. That's not magic. That's collective foresight. That's the river flowing toward you when you're at your most vulnerable. Even the air you breathe in a city, filtered, monitored, regulated, is shaped by policies paid for through shared resources. The smokestacks once belched freely. Now they're watched, not because corporations grew kinder, but because societies chose, through laws and enforcement funded by public money, that clean air is a right, not a luxury. So what if we stopped calling it paying taxes and started calling it participating? Because that's what it is. Participation in a shared world, not a transaction, but a thread in a tapestry. Of course, the system is flawed, deeply. Sometimes the river gets diverted into dry canyons of waste or corruption. Sometimes it floods one neighborhood while leaving another parched. And yes, some hands take more than they give, while others give until they're empty. These are real wounds, but they don't erase the underlying truth. The river itself is necessary. Without it, the land cracks. Imagine a town that decided one day to stop collecting taxes. No more funding for street repairs. No salaries for teachers. No inspections for food safety. At first, people might cheer, more money in their pockets. But soon, potholes swallow tires. Children gather in empty lots with no books. Restaurants serve meals unchecked for contamination. The fire department dissolves. And when the storm hits, no one comes to clear the fallen tree from the road. It wouldn't take long for that town to realize the money they saved was an illusion. Because safety, knowledge, cleanliness, connection, these aren't luxuries. They're the foundation. And foundations require upkeep. But here's the gentle paradox. We often only notice the foundation when it crumbles. When the bridge collapses, we ask, why wasn't it maintained? When the hospital is overwhelmed, we cry, where are the resources? When the power grid fails in a heat wave, we demand, who's in charge? We forget that those systems were built and sustained by the very thing we grumble about in April. And yet, when they work, we glide over them like ghosts. We drive on smooth asphalt and think only of our destination, not the engineers who calculated its curve. We drink clean water and think only of thirst, not the treatment plant humming at the edge of town. We take for granted the miracle of a functioning society, precisely because it functions. That's the quiet brilliance of a well-run public system. It disappears into the background of daily life. Like oxygen, you don't notice it until it's gone. So perhaps the problem isn't taxes themselves, but the story we tell about them. We've been sold a narrative of scarcity, that what's given to the whole is lost to the self. But what if the opposite is true? What if what's given to the whole returns to the self 100-fold? In safety, in opportunity, in dignity. Consider a city with excellent public transit. You may never ride the bus, but you benefit anyway. Fewer cars mean less traffic, cleaner air, quieter streets. Your property value rises. Your delivery arrives faster. Even your morning jog feels safer because fewer people are stranded, desperate, invisible. Or a society that invests in early childhood education. You may not have kids, but decades later, you live in a community with lower crime, higher innovation, stronger civic engagement. The child who learned to read at age 4 grows up to be the nurse who cares for your parents, the engineer who designs your home's solar panels, the artist whose mural brightens your walk to the market. The circle is wider than we imagine, and taxes are simply the mechanism that keeps the circle turning. Not a punishment for earning, not a penalty for existing, but a quiet acknowledgement. I am part of this, and I choose to help it live. Of course, the word choose is complicated. Taxes are mandatory, but so are many things that sustain life. Wearing a seatbelt, stopping at red lights, not dumping poison in the river. We accept these not as violations of freedom, but as the price of living together. Because freedom isn't just the absence of rules. It's the presence of conditions that allow you to thrive. And those conditions, clean water, safe streets, educated neighbors, don't build themselves. They're built by us, through us, as us. So the next time you feel that familiar pinch of resentment, when you see the deduction on your pay stub, pause, breathe, and ask, where is this going? Who is it helping? What world is it building? Because you're not just losing money, you're casting a vote with every dollar. A vote for the kind of society you want to wake up in tomorrow. And maybe, just maybe, that's not a burden. Maybe it's a quiet kind of power. The power to say without speaking, I believe in us. Beneath the surface of receipts and refund checks, far below the noise of political debates and April deadlines, there runs a quiet engine, an intricate, almost biological system that hums with the same steady rhythm as your own heartbeat. This is the hidden mechanism of what we call taxation. Not a cold machine of extraction, but a living circulation of care, trust, and collective survival. To understand it, imagine your body not as a single entity, but as a city of trillions. Cells trade nutrients, blood delivers oxygen, the immune system patrols for threats. Nothing is hoarded, everything flows. If one part suffers, the whole feels it. If one part thrives, the whole is stronger. Society works the same way. Taxes are the bloodstream of civilization. They begin not with force, but with a choice encoded into law. We agree to pool a portion of our private resources so that public goods can exist. This isn't idealism, it's practical biology. Humans are social creatures. We evolved not as lone wolves, but as tribes, clans, villages. Our survival depended on cooperation, sharing food during famine, defending the group from predators, raising children together. The brain even rewards us for generosity. Dopamine flickers not just when we receive, but when we contribute. We are wired to give. So when money moves from your account into the public treasury, it doesn't vanish. It enters a vast, complex circulatory system designed, however imperfectly, to nourish the whole. Let's follow a single dollar. It leaves your paycheck as a federal income tax. From there, it might help fund the National Weather Service, which tracks a hurricane before it makes landfall, giving families time to evacuate. Or it flows into the Centers for Disease Control, where epidemiologists analyze data that stops an outbreak before it becomes a pandemic. Or it supports a Pell Grant, allowing a first-generation student to attend college, breaking cycles of poverty that stretch back generations. At the state level, that same dollar, or one like it, might maintain a rural hospital where a farmer receives life-saving surgery, or fund a wildfire response team that saves entire communities from ash, or keep a public university affordable so knowledge isn't reserved for the wealthy. Locally, your contribution might repair a playground where children laugh under swings. It might pay the salary of a crossing guard who shepherds kids to school each morning. It might keep streetlights burning through the night, turning dark corners into safe passages. None of this is random. It's orchestrated through budgets, thousands of them layered like geological strata, each shaped by elected officials, civic input, historical need, and urgent crisis. Yes, mistakes happen. Waste occurs. Priorities get distorted. But the underlying logic remains. Collect resources fairly, distribute them wisely, sustain the system that sustains us all. And fairness is the linchpin. The hidden mechanism only works when people believe it's just. When a billionaire pays a lower effective rate than a teacher, the system fractures. When communities of color receive fewer resources for schools or infrastructure, the circulation becomes blocked, like cholesterol in an artery. Trust erodes. Participation feels like exploitation. But when the system reflects shared values, when the wealthy contribute proportionally, when funds flow to where they're needed most, when transparency replaces secrecy, something remarkable happens. People stop seeing taxes as theft. They see them as investment, not in abstract government, but in their neighbor, their street, their future. This is why countries with high trust in institutions, like Denmark, Finland, or Canada, also have high tax rates and high levels of life satisfaction. Citizens don't resent paying because they see the return. Universal healthcare, free college, parental leave, clean energy transitions. They understand the loop. I give and I receive. Not always directly, but always collectively. The mechanism thrives on reciprocity. Even the design of tax policy reveals this truth. Progressive taxation, where rates rise with income, isn't punishment for success. It's recognition that those who benefit most from a stable society, protected property rights, educated workforce, secure markets, have both the capacity and the responsibility to sustain it. Meanwhile, tax credits for low-income families, like the Earned Income Tax Credit in the US, act like valves that redirect flow to those most in need. preventing systemic collapse from inequality. And then there are the invisible taxes we rarely name: time, attention, civic duty, jury duty, voting, volunteering at a food bank. These too are contributions to the social organism. They cost nothing in dollars, but everything in commitment. And they remind us that taxation isn't just fiscal, it's relational. Perhaps the most profound part of the hidden mechanism is this: it turns strangers into stakeholders. You've never met the person who paved your street, but you benefit from their labor. You'll never know the student whose scholarship your taxes helped fund, but someday they might cure a disease that saves your life. You don't recognize the inspector who ensured your apartment building meets fire codes, but their vigilance keeps you safe while you sleep. This web of anonymous interdependence is the miracle of modern society, and taxes are the thread that weaves it. Without that thread, we unravel into isolation, each person guarding their own pile of gold while the world around them crumbles. But with it, we build something that outlives us. Consider the Golden Gate Bridge. No single person could have built it. It took engineers, welders, designers, financiers, and the public will to fund it through bonds and taxes. Today, millions cross it without a thought. But it stands because decades ago, a community chose to invest in a vision larger than any one life. That's the hidden mechanism in action, turning individual contributions into collective legacy. And it's happening right now, all around you. In the quiet hum of a water treatment plant filtering toxins so your morning shower is safe. In the satellite orbiting Earth, funded by public science, that guides your phone's map through city streets. In the librarian who helps a homeless teen fill out a job application, using resources paid for by people who will never know her name. This isn't charity, it's symbiosis. Just as your liver doesn't complain about filtering blood for your toes, a healthy society doesn't fracture over who benefits from shared resources. Because in the end, we all do. The system isn't perfect, far from it, but its core logic is sound. We rise together, or not at all. And the hidden mechanism, this quiet circulation of care through currency, is how we choose to rise. So the next time you think of taxes, don't picture a vault where money disappears. Picture a river, a bloodstream, a mycelial network beneath the forest floor. Picture life itself, flowing, sharing, sustaining. Because that's what's really happening. Beneath the forms, beneath the frustration, beneath the headlines, a miracle of cooperation continues, and you are part of it. Long before paper money, before metal coins bore the faces of kings, before the first ledger was etched into clay, humans practiced a quiet ritual of sharing that required no receipts, no audits, no enforcement. It happened around fires under open skies, in caves damp with breath and warmth, on riverbanks where fish were plentiful and the catch was never hoarded by one pair of hands. This was the original tax, not a demand, but a dance, a recognition that survival was a chorus, not a solo. In the Paleolithic camps of Ice Age Europe, archaeologists have found mammoth bones scattered near hearths, butchered with care, marrow extracted. But here's what's telling. The meat wasn't consumed by hunters alone. It was shared with elders, children, the injured, those who couldn't hunt but whose knowledge, care, or future labor mattered to the group. To keep meat for oneself would have been not just selfish but dangerous. It would have fractured trust. And in a world of wolves, cold and uncertainty, trust was the true currency. This impulse, to give so that all may live, didn't vanish with the Ice Age. It evolved. In ancient Mesopotamia, around 3000 BCE, the first cities rose along the Tigris and Euphrates. With them came granaries, not as private storehouses, but as communal reserves. Farmers contributed a portion of their harvest, not to a distant ruler, but to a temple that functioned as both spiritual and logistical center. In times of drought or flood, those granaries fed the hungry. In times of peace, they funded festivals, irrigation projects, scribes who recorded laws. The tax was grain. The purpose was resilience. The Egyptians called it Baku, a duty owed not just to Pharaoh, but to Ma'at, the goddess of truth, balance, and cosmic order. To pay your share was to uphold harmony in the universe. Laborers gave days of work to build canals or monuments. Artisans contributed craft. Priests offered ritual. None saw it as oppression. It was participation in a sacred whole, Even the word tax carries echoes of this deeper past. It comes from the Latin taxare, meaning to assess or to value, not to take. To tax was to measure one's place in the community, to acknowledge what you owed by virtue of belonging. And belonging was everything. In classical Athens, citizens didn't just pay taxes, they performed liturgies. Wealthy individuals funded warships, theatrical festivals, or public feasts as a civic honor. Refusing was seen not as fiscal prudence, but as moral failure. Why? Because democracy itself depended on shared investment. The agora, the public square, wasn't built by slaves alone. It was sustained by citizens who believed that a space for debate, trade, and assembly was worth funding. Move east, and the same pattern emerges. In ancient India, the concept of dharma included the duty of rulers to protect and provide, and of citizens to support the state through contributions of grain, labor, or goods. In China, Confucian philosophy emphasized ren, benevolence, and wei, righteousness, as the foundation of governance. Taxes were just when they served the people's welfare. Even among indigenous nations of the Americas, reciprocity was law. The Haudenosaunee, Iroquois Confederacy operated on principles of collective care. Surplus corn was stored in communal longhouses, redistributed in winter. Leadership wasn't about accumulation, but service. To hoard was to break the circle of life. And nature itself teaches this lesson. Bees don't question why they feed the hive. Ants don't demand invoices for tunneling. Trees in a forest share sugars through underground fungal networks. Older mother trees, nourishing shaded saplings with nutrients they can't yet produce. This isn't altruism. It's ecosystem intelligence. The whole survives only if the parts support each other. Humans are no different. What we now call taxation is simply the formalized echo of this ancient biological truth. Interdependence is the engine of survival. Even the structure of early tax systems mirrored natural cycles. In agrarian societies, taxes were collected after harvest, when abundance existed. They followed seasons, not arbitrary calendars. You gave when you could, because you knew others would give when you couldn't. Contrast that with modern wage-based taxation, where money is deducted before you even hold it, detached from harvest or hardship. No wonder it feels alien. We've severed the ritual from its roots, but the roots remain. Consider the potlatch ceremonies of the Pacific Northwest Coast peoples. Far from hoarding wealth, leaders gained status by giving it away, feasting entire villages, distributing blankets, canoes, even copper shields. The more you gave, the higher your standing. European colonizers misunderstood this as wastefulness, but it was sophisticated economics, redistributing surplus to prevent inequality, strengthen alliances, and affirm community bonds. In that light, what if modern taxation is just a pale bureaucratic shadow of the potlatch? A system that still moves resources from many to many, but without the ceremony, the gratitude, the face-to-face recognition. We've lost the story, but kept the structure, and the structure persists because the need persists. Because even in a world of smartphones and satellites, we still shiver in the cold if no one builds shelters. We still starve if no one grows food. We still drown if no one maintains levees. The tools have changed. The truth has not. You are not the first person to wonder whether the system is fair. Every generation has asked it, but few have questioned the deeper premise that we owe something to the whole simply by being part of it. That's not socialism. It's symbiosis. It's not collectivism. It's biology. It's not ideology. It's ancestry. Your cells don't bill your heart for oxygen. Your lungs don't invoice your brain for air. They simply give, because the alternative is death. So it is with societies. The ancient ones knew this. They built temples not just to gods, but to the idea that we are bound together. They stored grain not just for winter, but for each other. They sang songs not just for joy, but to remember. We are one body, and when civilizations forgot this, when elites hoarded while the many starved, they collapsed. Rome didn't fall because of barbarians alone. It fell because the social contract frayed. The rich retreated behind walls. The poor lost faith. The river stopped flowing. But where the flow continued, where giving and receiving remained in balance, civilizations endured. Not perfectly, not equally, but long enough to pass the torch. You carry that torch now. Every time you accept that your success is not yours alone, that roads, schools, laws, and peace made your journey possible. You honor that ancient pact, and every time you contribute, however reluctantly, you join a lineage that stretches back tens of thousands of years. Humans choosing, again and again, to build together rather than apart. So the next time you think of taxes, don't picture a modern IRS form. Picture a fire in a cave, a granary under a Mesopotamian sun, a potlatch feast on a cedar plank, beach, a mother tree feeding her young through hidden roots. Here, the whisper across millennia, what you give, you receive, what you share, you keep, what you build together lasts, because in the end, we were never meant to go it alone, and the oldest tax of all was simply this, to belong. Here is a quiet contradiction, soft as a breath held too long. We complain about taxes, call them burdens, intrusions, theft, yet the moment they vanish from view, we ache for their return. Think of it. When a bridge buckles from years of deferred maintenance, who do we blame? Not the engineers, not the weather, but the system that failed to fund them. When schools lack textbooks, when ambulances take too long to arrive, when wildfires rage unchecked because firefighting budgets were slashed, we don't shrug and say, well, we saved on taxes. We rage, we mourn, we demand more. It's as if we dislike the rain but grieve the drought. This is the paradox. We resent the mechanism that sustains us, yet panic when it falters. Why? Perhaps because taxes force us to confront a truth we'd rather ignore. We are not self-made. No one climbs a ladder alone. Every success is propped up by invisible scaffolding. Public education that taught you to read, roads that carried your goods to market, courts that enforced your contracts, police who kept your shop safe at night. Even the internet, that symbol of private innovation, began as a Pentagon-funded research project. To acknowledge that is to surrender the myth of total independence, the fantasy that we owe nothing to anyone but ourselves. And that myth is precious. It comforts us. It makes us feel in control. But life keeps whispering otherwise. Consider this. In the United States, the top 1% of earners receive about 20% of all income, but pay only about 40% of federal income taxes. That sounds generous, until you realize they hold over 30% of the nation's wealth. Meanwhile, the bottom 50% earn just 13% of income and pay almost no federal income tax. But they still fund society through payroll taxes, sales taxes, property taxes via rent, and the most regressive tax of all, time. Time spent commuting on crumbling roads, time waiting in underfunded clinics, time lost to insecurity. And yet, when people are asked, do you pay your fair share? Even those in the bottom half often say yes. Why? Because the system has convinced us that contribution is only measured in dollars deducted from paychecks, not in the daily toll of living in a frayed society. Now flip the lens. In countries like Sweden or New Zealand, where public services are robust and trust in government is high, people don't see taxes as loss. They see them as membership dues in a society that has their back. A Swedish parent doesn't worry about childcare bankrupting them. A New Zealander doesn't fear a broken leg will mean financial ruin. The cost is baked into a life that feels secure, dignified, whole. So the paradox deepens. The more a tax system delivers tangible, equitable benefits, the less it feels like taxation at all. It feels like care. But when the system is opaque, unequal, or visibly corrupt, when billionaires exploit loopholes while teachers buy classroom supplies with their own money, the same act feels like betrayal. Not because giving is wrong, but because the circle has been broken. The river flows only to the powerful. This is the heart of the tension. We don't hate contributing. We hate contributing to a story we don't believe in. Imagine two villages. In the first, every household gives a basket of grain each harvest. The village elder stores it in a communal silo. When winter comes, the grain feeds the sick, the elderly, the families whose crops failed. Everyone sees the silo. Everyone trusts the elder. Giving feels like wisdom. In the second, baskets are collected by strangers in uniforms. No one sees the silo. Rumors spread that the grain is sold for profit or hoarded by elites. Some families go hungry while others feast. Giving feels like foolishness. Same act. Opposite meaning. That's the paradox of modern taxation. It's not the act itself we resist, but the story surrounding it. And right now, in many places, the story is broken. We're told taxes stifle freedom, yet the freest people in the world live in high-tax societies with strong public goods. We're told lower taxes mean more prosperity, yet the post-World War II era of high marginal tax rates, over 90% for the ultra-wealthy, coincided with the greatest expansion of the middle class in history. We're told government can't be trusted, yet we trust it every time we board a plane, FAA regulated, eat a meal, FDA inspected, or drive a car, NHTSA tested. The cognitive dissonance is exhausting. But here's the gentle twist. The paradox contains its own resolution. Because if we can see that our resentment isn't toward giving itself, but toward injustice, opacity, and waste, then the solution isn't to abolish taxes. It's to reimagine them, to demand a system that reflects our values, progressive, transparent, efficient, human-centered. To insist that those who benefit most from society, through inherited wealth, network effects, or public infrastructure, contribute proportionally. To rebuild trust not through slogans, but through visible results, clean parks, well-paid teachers, affordable housing, renewable energy. In other words, the problem isn't that taxes exist. The problem is that they don't exist well enough. We've settled for a crude, outdated model, a blunt instrument when we need a scalpel. We tax labor more than wealth. We punish work more than inheritance. We fund prisons more than preschools. The priorities are inverted, but they don't have to be. Imagine a tax system that feels less like a bill and more like a blueprint for the world we want to live in, where carbon emissions are taxed, not solar panels, where stock buybacks are discouraged, but worker cooperatives are incentivized, where data, the new oil, is treated as a public resource and its extraction taxed for the common good. This isn't fantasy. It's already happening in fragments. Portugal taxes sun and wind energy at 0%. Estonia taxes corporate profits only when distributed as dividends, encouraging reinvestment. Bhutan measures gross national happiness alongside GDP, shaping policy around well-being, not just growth. The paradox, then, is not a dead end. It's an invitation to stop asking, how can we pay less, and start asking, what kind of world do we want our contributions to build? Because the truth is, we're always paying. Either we pay up front through fair, transparent taxes that fund prevention, care, and opportunity, or we pay later through emergency rooms, prisons, climate disasters, and social unrest. One way builds, the other breaks, and in the quiet space between resentment and hope, a new story waits to be written. One where taxes aren't a necessary evil, but a chosen good. Not a subtraction, but a signature. Your quiet yes to a world where no one is left behind. Maybe you felt it without realizing. That flicker of pride when your city builds a new bike lane, or your library hosts a free concert, or your town recovers quickly from a storm because the system's held. That's not government. That's us. And the paradox begins to dissolve when we remember we are the system. We always were. Look up tonight if you can, past the streetlights, past the haze of the city, into the velvet dark where stars burn with ancient patience. What you see is not stillness, but motion, galaxies spinning, light traveling for millennia, dust coalescing into new suns. And in that vastness, a pattern repeats. Nothing hoards. Everything flows. Stars do not keep their light to themselves. They radiate it outward, feeding nebulae that birth new stars. Black holes do not consume endlessly. They eject energy in jets that seed galaxies with heavy elements. Carbon, oxygen, iron, the very stuff of life. Even entropy, the universe's slow slide toward disorder, is balanced by pockets of creation. Stars forming, planets cooling, molecules assembling into cells. The cosmos is not a vault. It is a circulation, and human societies, for all their complexity, echo this universal rhythm. Consider the ocean. Currents move heat from equator to poles, regulating climate, sustaining fisheries, distributing life. If one current stalled, like the Gulf Stream slowing due to climate change, the entire system would shudder. Europe would chill. Rainfall would shift. Ecosystems would collapse. The ocean doesn't decide to share. It simply obeys physics. Flow is its nature. So too with economies. A healthy society, like a healthy ocean, depends on circulation. Money must move, not just accumulate. When wealth pools in stagnant reservoirs, offshore accounts, idle portfolios, gated enclaves. It starves the rest of the system. Productivity slows, innovation stalls, despair spreads. But when resources flow, through fair wages, public investment, accessible education, the whole ecosystem thrives. This isn't metaphor, it's thermodynamics. Just as energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed, so too with human effort and value. Taxes are one of the mechanisms that transform private gain into public good, turning individual success into collective resilience. Even time follows this pattern, the circadian rhythms in your cells, governing sleep, repair, hunger, mirror the tides, the lunar cycle, the turning of seasons. Life evolved not in isolation, but in sync with larger pulses. We are tuned to cycles of giving and receiving, activity and rest, accumulation and release. And what is taxation at its best but a social circadian rhythm? A regular, predictable pulse that ensures the body politic doesn't overheat with inequality or freeze from neglect. Now, look closer to the forest floor. Beneath the trees, a hidden network thrives, mycorrhizal fungi, thread-like and vast, connecting root to root. Older trees rich in sunlight send sugars through these fungal highways to shaded saplings. In return, the young trees share nutrients like nitrogen. It's not charity, it's mutualism. The forest survives because no tree goes it alone. Scientists call this the wood wide web, and it operates on principles startlingly like progressive taxation. Those with surplus support those in need, not out of pity, but because the health of the whole ensures the survival of the parts. Even the air participates. Photosynthesis is nature's original redistribution system. Plants take in carbon dioxide, what we exhale as waste, and transform it into oxygen, food, shelter. They don't bill us for the service. They simply give, because the alternative is a dead planet. And we, in turn, give back, through care, through conservation, through choices that honor the cycle. This is the wider mirror. Taxation is not a human invention. It is a human expression of a cosmic principle, interdependence, from quantum entanglement, where particles influence each other across distance, to gravitational orbits, where planets balance pull and motion. The universe favors connection over isolation. So why should we be different? We are stardust organized into temporary form, borrowing atoms from the earth, returning them when we're done. In between, we build, love, create, and share. That sharing is not weakness. It is alignment with the deepest laws of existence. Even physics offers a parallel. In fluid dynamics, there's a concept called laminar flow, smooth, efficient movement of liquid through a channel. But if the channel narrows too much, or if pressure builds unevenly, turbulence erupts. Chaos replaces order. Energy is wasted. Societies behave the same way. When the channels of redistribution, taxes, public services, social safety nets are well maintained, society flows smoothly, innovation flourishes, trust grows, people take risks, knowing failure won't mean ruin. But when those channels clog, when the wealthy evade contribution, when public goods decay, when the social contract frays, turbulence follows, populism surges, polarization deepens, institutions erode. The solution isn't to remove the channels, it's to clear them, to design a system that mimics nature, regenerative, adaptive, equitable. Imagine if our tax code reflected ecological wisdom. Instead of taxing labor, the very act of contributing, we taxed extraction, pulling resources from the earth without replenishing them. Instead of rewarding short-term profit, we incentivized long-term stewardship of land, of communities, of future generations. Instead of treating data as private property, we recognized it as a commons, like air or water, and taxed its commercial use for public benefit. This isn't utopian. It's biomimicry. Bees don't overharvest nectar. Salmon don't spawn only in the richest streams. Ecosystems self-regulate because collapse serves no one. Human systems can too. Already, cities are learning from watersheds, designing sponge infrastructure that absorbs rain like soil, reducing floods and recharging aquifers. Economists are studying ant colonies to understand decentralized coordination, Architects model buildings on termite mounds for passive cooling. Why not apply the same wisdom to taxation? A tax system modelled on a forest would protect the mother trees, nourish the saplings, children, students, startups, recycle waste into nutrients, prune only what's diseased in this light. The question, what if taxes don't really exist, transforms, because in the wider mirror they absolutely do. Not as arbitrary human rules, but as expressions of a universal truth. Nothing thrives in isolation. You are not separate from the street you walk on, the air you breathe, the child learning to read in a public school. You are part of a single breathing organism, local, planetary, cosmic, and taxes at their best are the pulse that keeps that organism alive. So the next time you feel the familiar tug of resentment, look up, see the stars giving light they'll never see returned. See the trees sharing sugar through hidden threads. See the ocean moving warmth across continents. And know this, your contribution is not an anomaly. It is alignment. You are not losing something. You are joining the rhythm. The same rhythm that spins galaxies, feeds forests, and turns strangers into neighbors. Because in the end, the universe doesn't ask, what's mine? It whispers, what's ours? And you, listening in the quiet, are already part of the answer. There is a quiet grief that lives beneath the surface of modern life, a sorrow not often named, but deeply felt. It's the ache of feeling unseen by the very systems meant to hold us, the loneliness of contributing to a machine that seems indifferent to your existence, the exhaustion of working hard, paying your share, and still wondering if it's enough, if you're enough. This grief isn't about money alone. It's about meaning. When taxes fund prisons, but not mental health clinics, when they arm borders, but not classrooms, when they bail out banks, but not families facing eviction, we don't just feel cheated, we feel betrayed, not by the idea of giving, but by the betrayal of purpose. Because deep down, we don't mind sharing what we have, as long as it builds something we believe in. And that belief is fragile. It's built in small moments. The librarian who remembers your name, the bus driver who waits an extra second as you sprint down the block, the park ranger who points out a hidden trail. These are the human faces of the public good, the living proof that our contributions matter. But when those faces disappear, replaced by automated calls, underfunded offices and crumbling infrastructure, the emotional contract phrase, we start to wonder, does anyone care? Does my part even count? This is where the real pain lives. Not in the deduction on your paycheck, but in the silence that follows. Yet, in moments of crisis, the veil lifts. Think of the early days of the pandemic, when shelves emptied and fear spread. Who showed up? Grocery clerks, nurses, delivery drivers, sanitation workers, many of them underpaid, overlooked, yet suddenly revealed as the backbone of society. And who funded the emergency response? The public treasury. The same system we grumble about became the lifeline we clung to. In those days, something shifted. People clapped for healthcare workers from their balconies. Neighbors left groceries on doorsteps. Communities organized mutual aid. For a brief, luminous stretch, we remembered. We are not islands. We are a network of care, and taxes are one of the threads that keep it taut. That's the emotional truth beneath the ledger. We don't hate contributing. We ache to contribute meaningfully, to feel that our share, however small, helps stitch the world back together. Because giving is not just economic, it's existential. When you pay for a public school, you're not just funding desks and chalkboards. You're saying every child deserves a chance. When you support public transit, you're whispering no one should be stranded. When you fund clean energy, you're promising the future matters. These are not transactions. They are declarations of hope, and hope, when shared, becomes resilience. Consider the quiet pride of a veteran who receives healthcare through the VA, not because they're wealthy, but because a society said, "We owe you." Or the relief of a single parent who accesses subsidized childcare and finally breathes, knowing their child is safe while they work. Or the dignity of an elder who ages in place, supported by home care programs funded by public dollars. These are not handouts. They are affirmations. You belong here. But when the system fails, when the veteran waits months for care, when childcare remains unaffordable, when elders are warehoused in neglect, the message flips. You don't matter. That's the emotional cost of a broken tax system. It's not just inefficiency, it's erasure, and yet the longing remains. Even those who rail against big government call 911 in an emergency. Even libertarians drink clean water and drive on public roads. Why? Because deep down we know no one survives alone. The emotional undercurrent of taxation is this. It's the price of belonging, not in a sentimental way, but in the raw, practical truth that human life flourishes only in community. We need each other to eat, to heal, to learn, to grieve, to celebrate. And building the infrastructure for that, together, isn't a burden. It's the deepest form of love made visible. Love that doesn't say, "I'll help you if you deserve it," but "I'll help you because you're here." That's the kind of world taxes can build, if we shape them with care. And maybe that's why, when we see it working, something in us softens. Think of the last time you walked through a well-kept public park on a Sunday afternoon. Children laughing, elders playing chess, strangers sharing benches. No one paid at the gate. No one was turned away. That space existed because, long ago, people decided that beauty and rest should be available to all. In that moment, did you feel taxed? Or did you feel held? Because that's the emotional alchemy of a healthy public sphere. It turns obligation into belonging. It reminds us that we're not just consumers or taxpayers. We're citizens, participants, co-creators. And in a world that often reduces us to data points or dollar signs, that reminder is a kind of grace. So the next time you feel that familiar resentment rise, pause. Ask not, "What did I lose?" but "What did I help build?" Maybe it's the streetlight that guides your way home at night. Maybe it's the firefighter who saved your neighbor's house. Maybe it's the scientist whose publicly funded research led to the vaccine that protected your family. You may never know their names, but they are part of your story, and you are part of theirs. This is the quiet miracle of collective life. We give without knowing who receives, and receive without knowing who gave. And in that anonymity, there is trust. In that trust, there is peace. Because you don't have to carry the world alone. You never did. You're just one thread in a vast, trembling tapestry, woven with the contributions of millions, past and present. And every time you pay your share, however reluctantly you're saying, without words, "I'm still here, I still believe in us." Even if the system is flawed, even if the leaders disappoint, even if the road is long, because the alternative, total, self-reliance, is not freedom, it's isolation, and the human heart was never built to bear that weight. So let the grief be honored, let the frustration be heard, but don't let them blind you to the deeper truth. Beneath the paperwork, beneath the politics, beneath the noise, there is a quiet current of care, and you are part of it. Not because you have to be, but because, in your bones, you know, we rise together, or not at all. And that rising, that shared, stubborn, beautiful rising is worth every penny. You've felt it without realizing. It's in the way morning light filters through your window, soft and golden, as if the world is offering you a gentle hello. It's in the sound of a school bell ringing down the block, clear, familiar, a tiny punctuation mark in the rhythm of your day. It's in the smooth glide of your car over pavement that doesn't jolt your spine, the clean scent of water from your tap, the quiet hum of streetlights flickering on just as dusk settles. These are not accidents. They are echoes of collective choice, paid for in increments so small, so routine, they vanish into the background of your life like breath. But pause for a moment. Listen, that sidewalk beneath your shoes. It was laid by hands you'll never see, funded by decisions made in rooms you've never entered. Yet it holds you steady. It guides your walk to the cafe, the bus stop, the park. It doesn't ask your name. It simply exists, reliable, unassuming there, and it's yours. Not because you bought it, but because you belong to the place that built it. This is the everyday wonder of what we call taxes. They are the invisible architecture of ordinary grace. Think of the last time you walked into a public library. No one checked your credit score. No one asked if you deserved to be there. You were simply welcome. You could sit in silence, read a novel, use a computer, attend a lecture, all for free. That space exists because, generations ago, people decided that knowledge should not be locked behind paywalls, that curiosity should be a birthright. You may not have noticed the librarian reshelving books, the custodian mopping floors, the IT technician keeping the Wi-Fi alive. But their work, sustained by public funds, made your quiet hour possible. Or consider the rainstorm that rolled through last week. You stayed dry under your roof, yes, but so did the city. Storm drains carried water away from streets. Sewage systems kept contamination at bay. Emergency alerts buzzed on your phone, warning of flash floods. None of it disrupted your sleep. And that's the point. A well-functioning public system doesn't announce itself. It simply prevents disaster. You only notice it when it fails. But when it works, it feels like magic. And magic, as it turns out, is just care made invisible. Even the air you breathe in a city, filtered, monitored, regulated, is shaped by policies paid for through shared resources. The factories that once belched soot now operate under emission standards enforced by agencies funded by, yes, taxes. The result? Fewer asthma attacks in children, longer lives, clearer skies. You don't see the inspectors, you don't meet the engineers, but you live in the world they helped create. This is the quiet miracle of the mundane, the extraordinary hidden inside the ordinary. The bus that arrives on time, the crossing, guard who waves children across the street, the park bench where you rest after a long walk, the fire hydrant, painted red and ready, though you hope never to need it. Each one is a testament to a choice, to build a world where no one is left to fend for themselves, and you, simply by living here, are part of that choice. Maybe you felt it without realizing, the subtle relief of knowing help is near. Not because you've met every public servant, but because the system holds. When your car breaks down on the highway, a state trooper stops to check on you. When your power flickers during a storm, crews work through the night to restore it. When a pandemic strikes, vaccines are developed and distributed not just to the wealthy, but to all. This isn't guaranteed. It's chosen again and again through budgets, elections, civic engagement, through the quiet act of paying your share. And the beauty is, you don't have to do it alone. You join millions who, every day, contribute not because they're forced to, but because they've glimpsed the alternative. A world where everything is transactional, where safety is for sale, where only the lucky thrive. We've seen glimpses of that world, in places where infrastructure crumbles, where schools close, where clean water becomes a luxury, and it's terrifying. But here, in the everyday wonder of your life, you're surrounded by proof that another way is possible. A way where giving and receiving are woven together so seamlessly, you forget they were ever separate. So the next time you fill a glass of water, don't just taste its coolness, taste the reservoir, the treatment plant, the pipes, the engineers, the regulations, all sustained by a system you help fund. When you walk under a streetlight at night, don't just feel its glow, feel the collective decision to keep the dark gentle for everyone. When you hear a siren in the distance, don't just flinch. Remember, someone is rushing to help a stranger, and they'll be paid not by that stranger, but by us all. This is not idealism. It's infrastructure, and it's beautiful, because the most profound acts of care are often the quietest. They don't demand applause. They don't require gratitude. They simply exist. Steady, reliable, there. Like the tide, like breath, like the quiet hum of a society that chooses, every day, to hold its people close, and you, listening in the stillness, are both held and holding, for in your small, steady contribution, in your choice to remain part of the whole, you help keep the wonder alive. Not with grand gestures, but with the quiet courage of showing up, of believing, even when it's hard, that we are better together, and that belief, woven into sidewalks, libraries, clean water, safe streets, is the truest magic of all. If money is a symbol of human trust, of promises made across time and space, then taxes might be its quietest ritual. Not a transaction, but an affirmation. Not a loss, but a declaration. I am part of this. We speak of taxes as if they are fixed things, lines on a form, rates in a code. But what if they are more like mirrors, reflecting not just what we owe, but who we believe we are? A society that taxes wealth to fund childcare says, children matter more than hoarded gold. A society that taxes carbon emissions says, the future breathes through us. A society that refuses to tax the ultra-rich says, some lives are worth more than others. The numbers are neutral. The meaning is chosen. And so, in the hush between breaths, a deeper question rises. Not loud, not urgent, but persistent, like the tide returning to shore. What kind of world do we want our contributions to build? This isn't economics. It's ethics dressed in spreadsheets. For centuries, we've framed taxation as a necessary evil, a price we pay for order, safety, roads. But what if it's something more tender? What if it's the modern expression of an ancient covenant? I will care for you. Not because I know you, but because we share this fragile, fleeting life on Earth. In many indigenous worldviews, wealth isn't measured by what you accumulate, but by what you give away. The potlatch of the Pacific Northwest wasn't about profit. It was about prestige through generosity. The more you gave, the higher your standing. Not because you were rich, but because you were relational. You understood that your well-being was tied to the well-being of the whole. That wisdom hasn't vanished. It's been buried under layers of individualism, market logic, and the myth of the self-made man. But it stirs still, in community gardens, mutual aid networks, public libraries, disaster relief. In the quiet instinct to share when crisis strikes, because deep down we know, no one eats alone in a storm. So perhaps the real question isn't, do taxes exist? But what do they reveal about us? When a billionaire pays a lower tax rate than their secretary, what does that say? When a nation spends more on prisons than preschools, what story are we telling? When clean water is a luxury in one neighborhood and a given in another, whose lives do we value? Taxes are moral documents, written not in ink but in policy, and every budget is a prayer for the world we wish to see. But here's the gentle paradox. The more we see taxes as a burden, the more burdensome they become. The more we see them as participation, the more they feel like belonging. Imagine a world where paying taxes felt like planting a seed, not in a distant field, but in your own backyard. You wouldn't resent the act. You'd tend it. You'd watch for sprouts. You'd share the harvest. That's the shift we're being called toward. Not to abolish taxes, but to reimagine them as acts of co-creation. What if, instead of dreading April 15th, we marked it as a day of civic renewal, a moment to reflect? Where did my contribution go? Did it heal? Did it build? Did it include? What if tax forms included not just deductions, but stories? Of the teacher your dollars supported, the forest your carbon tax helped protect, the veteran who received care because of your share. We've made taxation sterile, mechanical, distant, but it doesn't have to be. At its core, it's deeply human. It's the parent who pays school taxes, though they have no children, because they believe every child deserves a chance. It's the elder who supports public transit, though they no longer drive, because they remember what it's like to be stranded. It's the artist who funds libraries, though they rarely visit, because they know stories save lives. These are not sacrifices. They are acts of faith. Faith that the circle will hold. Faith that giving doesn't diminish you, it connects you. Faith that we are not separate, but strands in a single web. And if that's true, if we are truly interwoven, then every dollar you contribute ripples outward in ways you'll never see, but that shape the world. Nonetheless, like a stone dropped in a pond, your share touches shores you'll never visit. The child who learns to read, because of a well-funded school, may grow up to write the poem that heals your grandchild's heart. The scientist, whose research you helped fund, may discover the treatment that saves your life. The neighbor whose home was rebuilt after a fire, thanks to emergency services, may one day bring you soup when you're sick. This is the quiet reciprocity of collective life, not tit for tat, but trust for trust. And in a world that often feels fractured, that trust is revolutionary. So let us drift a little further into the wonder. If every breath is a dialogue between your body and the atmosphere, taking in oxygen, releasing carbon, then maybe taxes are society's breath. Inhaling resources, exhaling care, a rhythm of give and take that keeps the whole alive. If the universe expands not to scatter, but to create space for new stars, then maybe our contributions aren't losses, but invitations for a world more just, more beautiful, more kind. And if love is, at its core, the willingness to act for the good of another without guarantee of return, then perhaps the most radical act of love in modern life is simply this: to pay your share, not grudgingly but gratefully, knowing that in doing so, you help stitch the world back together, not perfectly, not instantly, but steadily. One sidewalk, one classroom, one clean river at a time. So as you lie here in the quiet, let the question linger, not as a demand, but as a companion. What world do I want my life to fund? And know that the answer isn't written in laws alone. It's written in your choices, your voice, your quiet, daily yes to the idea that we belong to each other. Because in the end, taxes don't build roads, we do. Taxes don't heal the sick, we do. Taxes don't teach children or fight fires or plant trees, we do. The money is just the vessel, the care is ours. And that care, that stubborn, ordinary, extraordinary care is the true currency of a life well lived. So maybe taxes don't exist as cold, hard things. Maybe they exist only as reflections of our willingness to say, again and again, I'm still here. I still believe in us. And in that belief, soft, persistent, luminous, lies everything. The numbers have faded now. The debates have softened into silence. What remains is not policy or percentage, but something quieter, something closer to breath. You're here, in this moment, listening not to argue, not to solve, but simply to be. And in that stillness, a truth settles like dust in sunlit air. You are part of a story far older than receipts, deeper than debt, wider than any single life. It's a story written in shared bread and guarded fires, in granaries and libraries, in the quiet hands that fix what's broken while the world sleeps. It's a story where giving and receiving are not opposites, but two wings of the same bird, lifting us together above the chaos of isolation. You don't need to fix the system tonight. You don't need to reconcile every injustice, close every loophole, heal every wound. That work belongs to days with light. But here, in the hush, you can simply remember you belong. Not because you've earned it, not because you've paid enough, but because you're here, breathing, hoping, wondering, and that is enough. Society is not a machine. It's a living thing, messy, imperfect, always becoming. It stumbles. It forgets. It wounds. But it also rises. It remembers. It heals. And every time it does, it's because someone chose to care. Not for reward, but because the alternative was unthinkable. You've been that someone, maybe without knowing it. Every time you've accepted that your success is not yours alone, that roads, schools, laws, and peace made your journey possible, you've honored the ancient pact. Every time you've paid your share, however reluctantly, you've whispered into the dark, I'm still in, and that whisper matters, because systems don't change through grand revolutions alone. They shift through millions of quiet affirmations, through people who keep showing up, who keep believing, even when the story feels broken. You are not responsible for the whole, but you are responsible for your thread. And your thread is already woven into the tapestry. Think of the last time you felt safe walking home at night. That safety wasn't an accident. It was built by streetlights funded by strangers, by patrols paid through collective will, by a community that said, no one should fear the dark. Think of the last time you drank clean water. That clarity wasn't magic. It was maintained by engineers, regulators, treatment plants, all sustained by a system you help uphold. These are not abstractions. They are acts of care, repeated daily, often without fanfare, and you are part of them, not as a taxpayer, but as a neighbor, a citizen, a human being who chooses, again and again, to remain in the circle. The emotional weight you sometimes carry, the frustration, the grief, the sense that your contribution vanishes into a void, is real. But it doesn't mean the circle is broken. It means you care deeply about its shape. And that care is sacred, because indifference is the true enemy, not disagreement, not critique, but the slow surrender to apathy, the belief that nothing you do matters. You haven't surrendered. You're here, listening, in the quiet, still curious, still wondering. That alone is resistance. And in this descent, this softening of thought, this release of urgency, there's room to rest in a simpler truth. You are held and you hold, not perfectly, not always consciously, but steadily. Like the trees that share sugar through hidden roots, you give without knowing who receives. Like the stars that radiate light they'll never see returned. You contribute to a future you may not witness. And that is enough. The world does not ask you to carry it alone. It only asks you to stay in the web. To trust that your small, steady presence matters. That your share, however modest, helps keep the river flowing. So let the questions rest now. Let the arguments dissolve like mist at dawn. What remains is not a problem to solve, but a presence to inhabit. You are part of something vast and tender, a story of interdependence that stretches back to the first fire, forward to the last star. And in this moment, as your breath slows, as your thoughts soften, as the weight of the day slips away, you are exactly where you need to be, not as a solver, not as a savior, but as a participant, a quiet, necessary note in the song of us, and that is more than enough. The moon moves behind a thin veil of cloud, its silver light diffused into a gentle glow that barely touches the rooftops. Somewhere, a child turns in their sleep, wrapped in blankets warmed by a furnace funded by 1,000 forgotten paychecks. Somewhere, a nurse checks a patient's pulse in a public hospital. Her shift paid not by the family at the bedside, but by a community that decided care should not depend on wealth. Somewhere, a scientist analyzes data in a quiet lab, her research grant tracing back to a line item in a budget shaped by citizens who believed in curiosity for its own sake. The world hums on, not with fanfare, but with fidelity, with the quiet reliability of systems that, however imperfect, keep choosing to hold us. You don't need to fix it tonight. You don't need to understand it all. You only need to rest within it, because you are already part of the story, not as a hero, not as a martyr, but as a thread, soft, essential, woven into the fabric of something larger than yourself. Think of the last time you walked down a street lit by lamps you didn't pay for individually, or drank water that arrived clean and cold without you ever digging a well, or felt safe enough to sleep with the windows open, trusting that someone, somewhere, keeps watch, not because they know you, but because they belong to the same fragile web of care. That web has a name we've grown suspicious of. We call it taxes, but maybe the word has outlived its truth. Maybe it's become a mask over something more tender. The quiet agreement that we are not alone. And in this moment, as your eyelids grow heavy and your thoughts begin to drift like leaves on a slow-moving river, let that agreement settle into your bones. You are held and you hold. Not through grand gestures, but through daily choices to participate, to believe, to remain. The numbers on the screen, the debates in the halls of power, the headlines that flare and fade, they are not the whole truth. Beneath them runs a deeper current. The steady pulse of people choosing, again and again, to build something that outlives them. A bridge, a classroom, a clean river, a safe street. These are not monuments to government. They are love letters from strangers to the future. And you, listening in the dark, are both sender and recipient. So let your mind soften now. Let the questions dissolve like sugar in warm tea. Let the weight of the day slip from your shoulders. Like a coat you no longer need, the world will still be there in the morning, with its potholes and its parks, its injustices and its quiet acts of grace. But for now, there is only this breath, this stillness, this belonging. You don't have to earn your place here. You already have it. Because to be human is to be part of the whole, to give without knowing who receives, to receive without knowing who gave. And in that anonymity, there is trust. In that trust, there is peace. So let your thoughts drift toward dreams. Let your body sink into the mattress like a stone into still water. Let the rhythm of your breath sink with the tides, the stars, the quiet turning of the earth. Everything else can wait. The moon moves, tides breathe, and so do you. The story continues, not because of perfection, but because of persistence, because of people like you who, even when weary, still show up, who still believe, however quietly, that we are better together. And if you ever wonder again, if the question rises like mist in the early hours, I'll be right here, whispering through the quiet,